needed it and that kind of stuff. And my mother was secretary for many, many years, and my sister told me, which I did not know, that before Mother, my dad was, and when he quit, then Mother just took it over. But it was her job. I can remember her sitting down with the lattice catalog and ordering chairs, or the little chairs that we had at the reading circle and that kind of stuff. And she would order, things like maps or that kind of stuff.
We didn't talk about maps in the classroom when we talked about supplies.
Okay, we had one of those maps that pulls down with many different maps on it that you could roll up and over to get a, you'd have an Iowa map and a United States map and a world map and I don't know what other. I imagine there was one of just showing the continents. I really don't remember what all, but there were quite a few maps on that roll thing.
Any extra supplies that your school had? That we've talked about the map.
Like it was pretty slim. Like I said, we had some readers. And
did the county superintendent bring books from the county library? The county superintendent's library?
I don't remember that happening.
Do you remember any library in your school?
No, we did not.
Okay.
There was a library in Audubon,
Okay.
but I don't remember. There was none in school.
Well, you mentioned the 8th grade exam. What do you remember about the 8th grade exam?
Well, first of all, I was scared to death. We had to go into Audubon. Everybody in the county came in to the same, it was in the county courthouse in, I don't know, probably the judges, probably the, some big room. And of course you were well monitored, so you didn't cheat. And like I said, I was scared to death, especially on the math part. I did pass it, but not too much. And they were hard. The 8th grade examinations were very hard. They really were. And we reviewed a lot, for, I don't know, 6 weeks, I suppose. She would review, whatever. So.
Did you have an 8th grade graduation ceremony?
No. Didn't have, it was during the war, and I guess people just had a lot of other things to think about, So.
And what did you do after graduation?
Well, in the summer, I always helped make hay. We farmed with horses, and I drove the team on the hay rack. And I also drove the team putting hay up in the barn, which scared me because, well, they always used the biggest team that they had on that to bring the hay up in the barn, because the double tree and all would, and then the 2 single trees would lay on the ground until you started out. And then when it started to pull the hay up, the hay was on one end of the barn and I was on the other, and the double tree would come and it was just right at my head level. And I can remember walking off to the side in case something would break. I'm sure that they checked it over very carefully and all before they did this, but it still scared me. And once the hay would get up and hit that pulley up there, and the horses had to pull very hard. That's why I said they used the biggest team they had. And but when it hit the pulley up there, then the double tree would not fall all the way down, but would go way down, and then you'd turn around and go back and get ready for the next one. And the folks had a really neat way of telling us, because they wanted the hay in different parts of the mile. And so, and they had this gong thing up there up high on the barn. And when it would get to the part where they wanted it, my uncle was inside, and he would pull the gong, and then that meant quit going. So I thought that was pretty neat, instead of trying to yell or something. And my dad was then out on the hay rack fixing the big hay fork into the hay, because the hay was loose. And oh, it was so fun to play in the hay mow. That was one thing that we did a lot of. And you have one end of the hay mow that's up high, and that was usually pretty full of hay. And then they would drop some hay down lower so they could fork it out to feed the horses and the cows and stuff. And it was so fun to swing on the rope and drop down. And the only thing Dad always said, always check where the pitchforks are. Another thing he warned me about, because I love hogs. I know a lot of people don't, but I do. But he always said, don't get in the hog lot, because they can knock you down and they can be very dangerous. So I never went in. I loved the little pig. I had a pet pig once. Used to sit on my lap. It was a runt, and to be truthful, I'm sure they were just gonna throw it out, And I begged and begged, couldn't I raise this little runt? And I did. I fed it, and I did this, and I did. It used to follow me all over the yard. It was no wonder I love pigs.
But he always stayed in the barn. Never.
Well, I made a special little pan up by the chicken house, and so he had his own little pen.
How long did you have him?
Well, he died, and I suppose there was something wrong with him, which is why he was a runt to begin with. And I felt so bad when he died, but I don't know. I suppose, so they're born in the spring, and I suppose like midsummer, toward late summer, maybe August, he died.
Did he have a name?
Yeah, let's see. Yes, I even had that in there